Que pasa, Choombattas? My name is Brent and I am simply known as the People's Champ, coming back at you with a brand new Cyberpunk TCG video. Today I'm going to be talking about 5 things on my wish list for the Cyberpunk TCG. But first, quick shout out to the Weirdco crew in the Cyberpunk TCG Discord, because we have reached nearly 40,000 users, surpassing the game of Riftbound. Riftbound is another TCG in the sphere of card games that are out right now. They are sitting roughly about 34,000, and we are sitting specifically, last time I checked, 39.5 thousand. So keep up the hype, Chooms. Keep the community growing so that we could have a prosperous start to this Preem card game that we have coming our way. So let's go ahead and get started on this wish list that I have for the Cyberpunk TCG. These are in no particular order, but we are going to start off with the product availability. Too many times now when a brand new and exciting TCG comes out, scalping can really ruin the initial launch. You know, we saw this with One Piece, we saw this with Riftbound, we saw this with Gundam, we even saw this with Dragon Ball's Fusion World at first. You know, sales numbers will always look nice to the investors, the companies that are producing these games, but really what happens is that the secondary market really suffers, because the actual players in the game, not just the collectors and scalpers, they have a hard time getting into these games early on because they are priced out. Simple common cards can be astronomically high, you know, not to mention like the higher rarity cards, like for example like SRs or alt art SPRs or anything like that, just for the equivalent for these games. I don't really know what they would be necessarily for, you know, the different card games out there, but just I'm thinking in, you know, Dragon Ball Master terms. You know, there's common, uncommon, rare, super rare, special rare, SCRs and all that. And, you know, even just like the SRs and SPRs, those levels of card rarities in other games, those would be pushing, you know, 80 for just the SRs, or even over 100 just for the SPRs, which really locks out a lot of people in this game, especially or in games when they are initially launched, because scalping is such an issue. Now, there is nothing that's going to be truly able to stop scalping in any TCG, any new launch, any new exciting game. One thing that Weirdco is doing that's going to help alleviate the scalping and make it more initially available for, you know, just the common person is their whole Kickstarter concept. Now, I understand that there are a lot of you out there who don't like the idea of a Kickstarter game. They want to be able to go to their LGS, be able to pick up boxes of, you know, the Cyberpunk TCG as soon as it comes out. But unfortunately, you know, it is hard to sell a lot of investors on a new card game with such a saturated market. And so I think the reasoning is sound here. Got to prove that all the chooms out there really want it. We got to show the Weirdco, we got to show CD Projekt Red that we all want the Cyberpunk TCG to not only come out but prosper. So I understand where they're coming from with the Kickstarter concept, and like I said, the Kickstarter should help with the scalping, because those who back the Kickstarter will be guaranteed to get those cards. So if you're really wanting to play this game, you want to get out there and back the Kickstarter when it is launched. Hasn't officially launched yet, but I feel like once people have proved that they really want this card game, standard releases should be plentiful, and then at least be immediately open. When if they're not necessarily, you know, fully, you know, super available, like they printed the hell out of the first set, they should at least be very, very, very immediately open to doing multiple print runs, because when these sets come out on the shelves, you know, of course, like I said, you can't stop the scalping. You can't stop people from you know, buying as much as they want to. I mean, LGSs do the best they can by limiting the amount of products people buy right off the rip, but you know, I think multiple print runs should be something that, you know, Weirdco and CD Projekt Red should initially actually truly consider, you know, when they're developing and putting out these card games. So the next thing on the list is competition off the rip. Players are going to want something to play for and a reason for buying in. You know, not everybody is a competitive player. Not everybody, you know, wants to go to the big tournaments and all that. But I think one thing that is a driving factor for any successful TCG is the competitive side. And, you know, of course, you know, when you have release events, you know, they have special promos. So everybody, even though there may be the competitive side, there may be the casual side, but everybody wants Preem-O promos. And of course, I think when they do have these competitive events, the events need to be streamed. I see too many times, even with the Dragon Ball Super Masters cards game that I know and love so much, they don't stream it very often. And when they do stream it, it's just like a smaller event. But I think if you want this game to take off and if you want this game to succeed to a level that I feel like it can, especially if the gameplay is solid, is to stream the events. Content and advertisers are like the main pathways to growth with TCGs. And if you're not streaming your events, especially when you're having them, I know that it can be difficult because you got to pay for the internet, you got to pay for the setup and everything, but you got to let people see the card game in action. And so if the people are able to watch tournaments, even casual players will watch tournaments just to see how the gameplay is. And of course, with streamed events, you need a Nova commentary crew. I volunteer myself as tribute, but I digress. You want a great set of casters, because too many times that I have seen with TCG streamed events that the commentators, they don't have that excitement that really gets me, going when I want to watch. Usually, most of the time, I just would rather they shut up because they're all boring and I'll fall asleep. That's not a shot at anybody in particular. That's not any particular casters. I just feel like the commentary squads in a lot of TCGs are just a little boring. And lastly, with the competitive side off the rip, I want to talk about having a judge program. People love to be a part of the community in many ways, whether they're content creators, whether they're just consumers, whether they're competitive players. But people also love being judges. It's kind of like one of those things where if you can't win, you might as well, or I shouldn't say win, but if you can't necessarily be super competitive, being able to be a judge is also an incentive, and WeirdCo is going to need them to keep events flowing and get cheating gongs from clipping those Preem promos from honest chooms. I've seen too many times, and we've all heard about it. Cheating is rampant across any competitive game possible, especially with TCGs. And, you just want to have a judge program off the rip. And I know it's going to take a little bit to get the ball rolling with that, because organized play in general is just really tough to manage. But, you want the judge program, you want people creating content, you want a good commentary, you want the events to be streamed, you want to make sure promos are off, super, super fire. And, competitive gameplay, whether people want to admit it or not, is a driving force in the success of a TCG. Next up, that brings us to Preem quality control. Quality obviously should go without saying, should be a priority for the cards. Nobody wants terrible feeling card stock holding all that dope ass art that they're working really hard on. I'm looking at you, MetaZoo, because MetaZoo has the worst card stock I've ever felt in my life. I like nice thick card stock with dope back, card back art. And of course, you don't want your cards damaged straight out the pack. But that also kind of brings down to something that I feel like is going to raise a lot of concerns and be something that they might have to deal with, because shouts out to the French community, I love you all, but it is no secret that we will have an international audience for this game. Cyberpunk 2077, Cyberpunk, just the IP in general, is worldwide. We've seen in the Discord, people from all over the place, whether it be France, Brazil, Europe, anywhere in Europe really. And of course, we've seen people from China or Indonesia pop in. Proper translations is what I'm getting here. It's if WeirdCo is considering doing multiple languages, they need to make sure that the card text matches the Oracle text as one-to-one as possible. It's not a secret that slight mistranslations can drastically affect how a card reads and how the effects work, which will cause problems in worldwide events. Because if you have a French card that it says sort of the same thing, but punctuation is different depending on how punctuation will affect cost and effects on these cards, or just verbiage is flipped around a little bit. It could change the effect of a card from an English card to a French card to a Chinese card to a Russian card to a Brazilian card. If it's slightly off, it could really throw off events, especially if you have a world championship event where people have, you know, multilingual cards with them. So people are going to either need proper like Oracle text translations, or you're really need to work hard to try to make, you know, that text one-to-one as possible as the original Oracle text, which I know is hard to do because not a lot of things translate one-to-one in different languages, but it's something that I am genuinely concerned about. I think Magic the Gathering does a really good job of this. You know, they've done it for years, but it is a fearful thing because, you know, my experience with specifically the Dragon Ball Super Masters card game, we've had French text and we've had English text, and there was a couple of cards in the recent past, I'd say within like the last year or so, 2 years, there have been cards that were printed differently or the text wasn't quite one-to-one, and so it was made to one card that, the same card, one printing extremely more broken than the one that was in a different language. So that's just a concern of mine. That's just part of my quality control wish list here. I just want to make sure that Weird Co does in fact do a fantastic job with translations. I'm not multilingual, otherwise I'd volunteer to help with that too. The next thing on my wish list for this video is non-rarity locked decks. There is no doubt that everybody wants those nice chromed out cards with the fancy Nova foiling, but sometimes those get price locked, you know, whether or not it's, you know, just because they're rare cards and they're good. Playability in high rarity equals a very expensive card. What we don't want is those cards to only come in those rarities. We need to be able to access lower rarity versions of those fancy cards so that budget players can have fun too and not be locked out of by rarity or basically price locked. Again, my experience with Dragon Ball Super Masters has recently done a fantastic job of this. They have an uncommon printing of a card, and then they have an SPR printing of the same card. So then you have your budget version, and then you have your high rarity ho ass card themselves. I am a rarity ho, so I'm usually always buying that SPR. So I really just want to make sure that if they do, you know, high rarity cards that are essential to like build a deck, that they need to make a lower rarity version of it. You know, we've seen that with Altarts, that with the leaks that they put out for the IGN article, so I think that they're going on the right path there, but it is something that is on my wish list, that they make sure that if they have multi-rated cards, that one of them is an affordable one and one of them is a fancy art one. And last but not least on this video of this particular wish list, I would really want to see well-reasoned and regular ban lists for the competitive side. Ban lists are wildly important. Let's face it, TCGs are never going to be 100% absolutely balanced at all times. There will always be broken cards that take over the meta. Weird Co needs to make sure that they are keeping their fingers on the pulse of the community and the data received from events ran for the Cyberpunk TCG to make informed decisions on correcting the meta so that we can always have healthy gameplay. Again, this is easier said than done, but it is something that I see happening a lot with a lot of different TCGs, that they are kind of a little lazy about putting out ban lists. It feels like sometimes formats can really drag on, especially with early sets. You know, early sets of new games. You know, we saw with Fusion World, set 1, there was obviously the best deck, and it wasn't the worst format, but then set 2 drops, and there was the Top Coup, Tournament of Power Goku, that took over the meta and basically had to be effectively, not the leader itself was banned, but there was a lot of cards that made that deck really good, banned, and in a damn near killed the game, and they're only at set 2. And of course, that you're gonna always have that happen with TCGs. The other big thing with ban list is communication is everything here. Personally, I want to know the reason why. Not every Choom will like the cards on the ban list, that's just facts. But Weird Co, if you explain your reasoning behind your decision, I have no doubt the community will at least respect you a little bit more for the choices you choose to ban on the ban list. And I feel like there are a lot of other TCGs out there that give out some broad generic explanation like hinders future game design. I feel like people really want to be able to know what's in your head up there. Like, why did you choose the ban, for a lack of better words, Corpo V? You know, why did you ban that legend? Was it not just a design error? Was there a specific gameplay loop that made Corpo V broken? I don't know. I'm just theorizing here. I just think like when you put out a ban list, I really want to know the reason why, because a lot of people will fail to understand the disease versus the symptom. People will often want one card banned when really the problem is the other card that enables that card that everybody's bitching about. So like I said, just give us a reason, at least a well-rounded reason or well-reasoned reason for redundancy purposes. With that being said, thank you all for tuning in to another Cyberpunk TCG video. Let me know what's on your wish list down in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Hey everybody, this is the People's Champ thanking you for watching this video. If you want to see content just like this, there should be a playlist attached at the end of this video. If not, check our channel out and see what else you like there. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe.